Hey all, as you start to funnel in, I am so excited to be hosting y'all today. My name is Hank Portney. If you haven't met me before, I am a product manager at Paperless Parts, which means that my job is to work with folks like you to make our product better. And I could not be more excited to share with you today Wingman, Paperless Parts AI-powered quoting assistant. As a collection of secure, CMMC compliant, AI powered features, Wingman will help you get more accurate quotes out the door faster with less risk by helping you set up, triage, and cost your parts from RFQs and prints. In this session, we'll cover a lot in just 30 minutes, including why we call these features Wingman, how Wingman helps you with quote setup and triage and costing, Paperless Parts' approach to responsible artificial intelligence, a sneak peek at what's coming next, and finally, our vision for Wingman long term. Especially in that second section, I am so excited to debut 5 brand new capabilities that you might have seen cropping up over the last week or two. So stay tuned. So why Wingman? We know that there are hundreds of questions to answer during quoting, and so many more places to look for those answers. On screen right now are just a host of activities that y'all do during estimating, and even more of the places that you have to look to find those answers between setting up your parts and looking through all this information in RFQs and prints, disqualifying, building your router, costing out requirements. With so many questions to answer, it can be really daunting to jump into a quote and to stay focused on answering the most important of those questions. Wingman helps you stay on target to answer those most important questions. And I hope you'll see in the demo how that's true. Wingman is going to be like having an expert team member who's always got your back. A key word there is expert team member. Wingman understands manufacturing, unlike other AI tools, and therefore can help you do your work with the context that you might be lacking or that it knows things like you do. Wingman helps you not miss critical requirements from your content, making sure that you reduce your risk in quoting. And finally, Wingman is secure and CMMC compliant, so we can support aerospace and defense work. And of course, who doesn't love Top Gun? Let's talk about how Wingman helps you, starting with quote setup. So good news, if you've been using Paperless Parts for a while and you've been using our quote setup functionality, you've actually been using Wingman this whole time. In this short demo, I will walk through some of the quote setup features that Wingman supports, and more importantly, focus on the kinds of questions it helps you answer most quickly. On screen are just a few of those capabilities that Wingman can do in this experience. Let's take a quick run through and see it in action. Here you can see I have in my inbox an RFQ I received from a customer, in this case it's myself, with a table full of parts in that email, as well as a set of attachments, a whole bunch of part files. Immediately already a lot to do here. Let's try to get started. The first thing that I'll do is I'll forward this email into Paperless Parts with our email forwarding functionality, pressing the send button. And once the message is sent, moving over to our quote dashboard, where we can see that this email may have come in. In just a few moments, this should refresh and we should see our quote pop up on the board. While this is happening, Wingman is scanning the contents of the RFQ for information. So if you're seeing it take a little bit, it's because the intelligence is already starting to kick in on top of your content here. Let's give this one refresh. See if we can get this to pop in there. Here we are. This should be it. Was that so? Excellent. Once the email is forwarded into Paperless Parts, you'll see things are already starting to happen from Wingman. First of all, Wingman has identified the RFQ receive date from this email and the associated thread, and I can apply it with one button click right there. Wingman has also quickly already identified the associated contact and the corresponding account of the RFQ in that email, meaning I don't have to figure out who I'm coding this for, and my notes for this customer seem to be really demanding, are already found on this quote. Most importantly, though, Wingman is suggesting creating bulk line items from the contents of that email using the table found in that email, meaning with no additional work, clicks, or reading, I can go and create fully featured line items from that content. Not only did that happen, but Wingman's got our back yet again, reading the contents of these files and suggesting that we add them to the corresponding line items by matching that line item content. As you can see, in just a moment, Wingman got us fully set up on this quote and is helping us answer the most important question. Do I have everything I need from my customer to begin quoting? Because I see that two files were not assigned, they probably weren't in that table from the email. And that means that I don't have the quantity breaks that were found in that table for them. Although I can quickly add these files to line items here, I'll need to ask my customer for those quantity breaks, and Wingman helped me realize what I'm missing and what I need to ask my customer about. That's that most important question in setup, not all the work of getting your quote set up. So in just moments, you can go from 0 to answering that most important question thanks to Wingman. Of course, Wingman has one additional capability in this space as well, which you may be familiar with, and that is suggesting part numbers and revisions from files if they are not found elsewhere. As you can see here, Wingman found the contents of a part number from this file. And as we'll cover a little bit later in costing and triage, for the first time, is going to show you its train of thought on doing that. As you can see here, when we open the viewer for this part, it's now highlighting in context where it found that information and allowing me to confirm it in this space, meaning that I can more easily verify what Wingman has done and trust it over time. But of course, you may be familiar with this from using our quote setup features for a while. Let's jump into what's new and exciting. And that's in the triage and costing space. Wingman for triage and costing will help you identify common process and finish keywords to understand what processes or finishes might be needed for your part and answer questions for that. It will identify the most likely material associated with a given part or print. It will examine 10,000 plus process and material specifications, including OEM specific specs. It will identify unified thread standard and metric thread specifications. And it will identify ITAR and CUI keywords, as well as personal identifying information. Let's take a closer look at how these features help you answer those most important questions, both looking at them one by one and then taking a demo tour through some of the functionality in place in the app. Starting with CUI and PII. Wingman will scan your files for controlled unclassified information keywords, keywords that indicate that that document is export controlled or cannot be shared with non-US persons. What this helps you do is answer who on my team can actually estimate this, who's allowed to see this information. With Paperless Parts A&D package, you can, of course, upload your export controlled information to Paperless Parts and also restrict or change permissions of who can access it. And so this can help you understand that right away. As well as Wingman will identify personal identifying information like phone numbers, addresses, emails, and names, which can help you understand whether you can or cannot share that document with different groups of people. This is table stakes for Wingman, right? But it's helping you understand more about the contents of your document and help you quickly understand what decisions you need to make around it over time. Next up is processes and materials. Wingman will search for 29 common process keywords and highlight those directly, including things like anodizing, heat treating, and welding. What this does is help you answer what processes might be needed for your part and what routing steps do you need to add to your router. At the same time, Paperless Parts will search for common keywords for material and map that to a likely Paperless Parts material, which means that you can more easily set up your quote and decide on what material quotes you need. Specifically exciting among this is searching for whether you need outside services, right? If you see an anodizing step and you don't have anodizing capabilities in-house, Wingman, just by telling you that this information is present in your quote, tells you that you need to get an outside service quote going. And of course, Wingman also understands these requirements not just in their written form, but also as specifications. Wingman for a while has been searching for MIL, ASTM, AMS, and specifications, specifically process and material specifications. But we've just added a brand new capability here, which is we've added 900 plus OEM specs. And we surface the definition of these right in the app when possible. Those OEM specs include Boeing, GE, Northrop Grumman, Pratt & Whitney, Rolls-Royce, and more. And we really intend to expand this over time. We're really excited about specifications because we know how difficult it can be to interpret the contents of print when they're in spec form. As a string like mil-A8625, that doesn't really mean anything in English if you don't already know what that is. And we've heard folks talk about having to engage their QA team to help interpret a quote at the time of estimating. Wingman saves you time and avoids that conversation by giving you that definition that we've found right there, visible next to your print. Here you can see it's explained this as an aluminum and aluminum alloy coating situation. Specifications, including these new OEM specs, help you answer some key questions. What does this spec mean in English in terms of requirements? What materials does the spec imply? What material do I need to set on my part? What routing steps do I need to add to respond to this specification? And maybe what inspection do I need to perform in the case of specific inspection specs? Again, we expect the list of specifications to grow over time. So this will continue to get more intelligent and help you. And if you're seeing from your customers a specific category of specs that we're not covering yet, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear more and understand how and when we can bring them into Wingman. Beyond process and finish specs, we also understand thread specs, where Wingman will search for unified thread specification or metric thread specification callouts and identify them for you in the contents of your print with a highlight like here. By having a thread callout, you can immediately know whether tapping is required for a given part, like the CNC part right here, meaning it'll help you understand whether you need to add a tapping step to your router or if you need to buy special tooling in the case of rarer thread patterns. Again, all of these things that we've seen so far are helping you answer the most important triage questions about your parts. So you can decide if you want to manufacture them, right? Between everything that you've seen here, you might find things that quickly disqualify the part, like an overly tight thread that requires a special tool, or a spec that requires an undue amount of work that your shop isn't prepared for, or a material that y'all do not like working with, or a process that you don't support in-house. This helps you answer those most critical questions for triage. And we'll see that in a moment as we scroll through an actual quote where these are found. And these also quickly support costing as well, right? We covered how by just seeing these, we can quickly make changes to our router right away based on actionable information that Wingman found. To show this in action, I want to show you an actual quote with some of these extractions in them to give you a sense of what we are doing here. Here we are in a quote, much like the one we set up before. And as you can see, right when you're scrolling through this quote without opening any line items, you already see what Wingman has found in the Found in Files container. You can see it's finding some basic information and things that we just covered, like a specification, as well as some data control aspects and a process. Right from here, just scrolling through your quote, you can make actionable decisions about these parts and choose whether you're going to quote them or not. It may also help you assign a particular estimator. And so if you have a decision to make, all you have to do is pop open an item, assign an estimator, choose a status, including no quote, and then you're making decisions right away. And this information is found here as well. If we go through this quote in particular, we can see that there is a wide variety of information found, and we can really get a sense of what's in this quote without doing anything more. But of course, thanks to our final piece of functionality that I've been hinting at this whole time, We can now follow Wingman's train of thought by finding the sources of this information on prints. Here we can see in just this first line item, thanks to new Wingman functionality, we are seeing highlights for the information it found right on the print, including its assumption about aluminum 6061T6, thanks to 6061T6 being present in the print. We can assume that that's probably correct. We can see that the specification was also found in here as a part of a finish requirement. And we can see that there's an anodizing finish process present as well. So between the two of these things, I think we can be pretty sure that anodizing is required. This is going to be true for every single item in this particular quote, and ideally on your prints as well, as Wingman is scanning prints and looking for this information. Let's see if we can find a really, really interesting example with a whole bunch of extractions. You can also note the total count of findings right here on the quote. Taking a look at this one, let's see, let's find one with more. See if we can find you a specification that is novel. Here we are. Okay. Taking a look at this particular part, we can see that it has found not only some basics like the aluminum material, but it's also found some threads. If we take a look at this further, we can see that while this is not necessarily a thread call out on a particular part, there is a nut that requires this thread. And so that can tell us information about this particular hardware or any work we need to do to actually fasten this onto the part. Continuing back through our quote, we can continue to look and find, I want to see if I can find y'all a spec that is outside the norm. As you can see as we're scrolling through here, a lot of specs previously called out, and anytime we open any one, we can see exactly what that means. Taking a look at this last part right here, we can see that when there are competing specs, you can also try to understand why each one is both present. Look at this one, we can see this is a finished spec and that this is a material spec. Altogether, as you can see, thanks to the new functionality that we are extracting and the highlights that we're making within the print, Wingman is helping you stay focused on answering those most important questions. Can we or should we manufacture these parts? What outside services do I need? What changes to my router do I need to make to respond to these parts? And this is just the beginning. As I continue back through our slides, I'm going to give you a sense of what's coming next and our vision for Wingman over time to accelerate your quoting. But before I do that, I want to answer some questions that you might be having about AI and the responsible AI that we've built in Wingman. When AI is in your software, there are a lot of scary questions you need to consider, as AI is cropping up everywhere in many different platforms. Are AI results reliable? Can you depend on them? Do you know why you can depend on them? Do you know which results are AI produced versus empirically found in your documents or your content? How is your data being used to train AI models? Is it going places that you wouldn't expect or that you wouldn't want? What third-party services or partners are being fed your data, right? Who's getting your data that you didn't even account for when you're working with that software? Have the companies whose AI you're using had third-party audits for cybersecurity, like FedRAMP or SOC2? And finally, are those AI features compliant with CMMC requirements for aerospace and defense work? It can be really easy to accidentally send your files somewhere that violates something that you wouldn't expect. And so it's really important that you ask yourself these questions about the AI tools that you use, we find. Thankfully, we've made Wingman into responsible AI by focusing on the combination of utility and reliability and security and privacy. In utility and reliability, we are reducing quoting risk with results that you can trust and verify. Wingman is objective in that it finds answers within your files, as you saw through the highlights on your print content. It's not guessing or making up results, like things like ChatGPT. Wingman is traceable in that it is showing you context from your print, right? You can follow its train of thought back to what it found and what it did. For example, in the case of material, Wingman is making a leap towards the most relevant paperless parts material, but you can see what it found that got it to that decision. So you can understand whether you would trust the result or not. And finally, Wingman will always be reliable. What you saw today is primarily showing you results in the platform. Of course, with quote setup, we took more action for you for things that we thought were deeply reliable. And when we suggest part numbers and revisions from print content, we are also indexing on the reliability of what we find. But for things that are not reliable enough yet, that we can't guarantee we're finding most of the time, or that when we find it, it's guaranteed to be right, we are sticking with displaying those results and not automating or taking action on your behalf from those results. That means that you always have the ability to trust what Wingman does. And even when Wingman is taking action on your behalf, you have the ability to verify, change, tweak, or undo the things that are happening when Wingman takes action. As I get into the vision a little bit later, you'll see how we're going to push the boundaries on this over time. But the trade-off as well for this approach to reliability and showing you information first is that we are putting you at the cutting edge of technology around Wingman. You are going to see over the next few months the latest and greatest powerful new extractions that I'll even start to tease out in our next preview. They may not be reliable enough for prime-time automation just yet, but we do think that if they can give you an actionable piece of information that can accelerate your coding, we'd like to get that in your hands sooner. And so that's why you'll start to see us talk about this like right now, and more things start to show up in Wingman's inferences. But to those questions from previous, I want to talk about security and privacy. We have taken great care to keep your data private and secure. When we are extracting content with Wingman, we are locating content in your documents, not generating them from elsewhere. This means that there is no chance that your data is going to go where it should not, and that somebody else's data is not going to show up in your experience, right? We are 100% keeping your data safe for your account and your work. Wingman is also safe for shops with CMMC level 2 requirements. And this is something that Paperless Parts undergoes audits for, and so you can really trust. After this, we can share out links to our responsible AI section of our blog, where you can read more about how this is true in practice. We never send data to non-compliant third-party AI tools or systems. As AI starts to crop up in other software, if you look through the fine print, a lot of times you'll find that ChatGPT and OpenAI are at the other end of some piece of data that's being sent around. Paperless Parts is not doing that. We are using AI models that are developed and trained in boundary in the secure Paperless Parts Gov Cloud, meaning your data never leaves where it should not, is always secure for aerospace and defense work. This is how we meet CMMC level 2 requirements for your shop. If you're interested in this more, you're welcome to ask questions in our Q&A, and I can do my best to answer them, or we can point you to the relevant documentation after the fact. So next up, I'd like to show you a sneak peek of what is coming next, right? Everything that we showed you today is already really, really exciting and helps you make actionable decisions. But what is the next step up? Let's take a look. First up is our next most powerful extraction, and that is GD&T control frame extraction. Here you can see in this demo environment, this is not reliable enough even to show you just yet, we are finding control frames full of important GD&T from this print, including a true position set of callouts, as well as a concentricity set of callouts. You can imagine that not only finding this is really helpful when interpreting a scary or messy print, because you'll know that there are difficult requirements found somewhere in your print if these are high tolerance or many decimal places like you're seeing here. But when we are starting to interpret this information into meaning, understanding when these attachments are connected to a whole requirement, interpreting that as a whole feature in the long term, this will mean that you can way more easily take actionable steps to manipulate your router for the most complex or difficult requirements in your print. We are unbelievably excited about this. The technology that goes into this is kind of wild. We're scanning for symbols across the print and looking for information. And here's a clean example of how it can come out and how you can use this information to take action against your router. Not only that, but we're also focusing on even more power to the quote setup experience, specifically focused around assemblies. Here you can see here, in this demo environment, we have a table found in a print that for the first time with this demo experience was extracted by Wingman for you to copy and paste for bomb building. In this example, I can drag my cursor over these part numbers, go back into the quote in our brand new beta BOM builder functionality that we are internally testing at the moment, and quickly build out the entire assembly from this print in just a few moments by copying and pasting information from our print into the BOM builder. And in one button click there, I've now created an entire assembly from that print seamlessly and easily. We are unbelievably excited about the power of these upcoming features. And you'll hear more about this soon, especially from our product manager, Meg, my colleague, who's owning this BOM builder experience. In the future, we'll be building on top of this even further, as I'll paint in our vision section. Last up, our vision for Wingman. We want Wingman to continue accelerating every aspect of your coding experience and keep you focused on answering those most important questions. We'll continue delivering cutting-edge extractions to you as soon as they are ready, right? Maybe those GD&T extractions aren't ready just yet, but as soon as they are, we'll hope you'll see them. We'll continue to support quote setup for assemblies, not just by helping extract those tables for you to use, but even by proactively recommending BOMs, multi-page PDF split ups when those parts are from many different levels of an assembly and those files need to be moved elsewhere, and even recommending file assignments while BOM building. So you'll build in that BOM like we saw, and then you'll get a one-button kind of suggestion, maybe, to move those files over to the BOM and get it built out with those files. We'll, of course, continue down understanding and meaningfully translating GD&T into recognition of both features, like holes, and the biggest risks, like tight tolerances, not just finding information on prints, but making meaningful inferences that can help you make decisions and recommending those to you in context. And finally, when our extractions are reliable enough, we'll be more than excited to deliver those to P3L and costing for a lightning-fast estimating experience. Because the contents of prints can be subjective and because the technology here is not infinitely reliable just yet, we're holding off on this until we are sure we can deliver a fantastic experience that you can trust and rely on. And in the meantime, you can leverage the power of our visible extractions to make those decisions and changes yourself. Thank you for listening. I'll now take any questions in our Q&A system here, and I will start going through those right now. Derek, your question about CMMC compliance would meet FedRAMP moderate or FedRAMP high. I'm going to give you a temporary answer, and then I will encourage you to check our documentation. I believe the answer is FedRAMP moderate equivalent, and you'll have to talk to our team to learn more than that. And Scott, you asked a question about when moving a DXF from supporting files to quote item list, thickness prompting. Great question, a little bit off subject here. I will encourage you to reach out to our team, and I will say that's also a problem that we are thinking about. Robert, you asked OEM specs that include internal workmanship standards for surface finish, break edge, etc. Great question. With OEM specs, we are using right now publicly available information. We don't necessarily have every single detail about the requirements of those specs, but we are presenting publicly available titles, often found from those OEM specs websites. If the information that you're looking for is found in those titles, you'll see that. And I will also say, if you are not seeing something that you would expect to see when you read one of our descriptions, please reach out to our team. We'd love to see if we can get that included in the right way. Thanks. Let's see, an attendee asked, will the spec callout, click on it and see the spec itself? Yes, when you click on either the highlight for a spec or the little spec in the sidebar next to a print, you will be able to click on it and see the definition of the spec, as I hopefully showed there a couple of times. Robert, you asked as well, is Wingman capable of reading and extracting data from 3D PDFs? Great question. There are sort of two parts of data to 3D PDFs. One is the model annotation data, and the other is the PDF content itself. Paperless Parts today will separate the model from the PDF content, and the model will include PMI, while the PDF will be separated as text content. Wingman will scan the PDF content, but it won't currently interpret the PMI found in the model, but that is something that we are thinking about over time. So kind of a half yes, half no there, depends on your context. You also asked for step files containing MBD. Does it read or denote the difference between 214 or 242 file type? Right now, We are not using Wingman on PMI MBD in models just yet. So I don't know if that question is super relevant because of that answer, but that is something that we're thinking about over time, and I can try to answer that for you async when we get to that particular step. Derek, you asked, will the GD&T feature also highlight the corresponding datums as they're referenced on the print? That is a fantastic question. It's not something I want to promise you right now, but I will say that that is something that is top of mind for us as we start to interpret features, recognizing that datums are going to be included in control frames, and that then going back and finding the datum that that references can be challenging. I will say I am so excited to take this question you asked and slap that in a channel to my team and say, guys, this is a thing that we should be working on, and here's some proof. So no promises, but definitely exciting, and I'm really glad you asked that. Robert, you are on fire with these questions. I appreciate it. Keep going. Robert, you asked for GD&T extraction. Is Wingman capable of interpreting specific callouts? You're seeing some specifics here. I'm not sure I have enough information to interpret your question off the top of my head. I think I trust Wingman to understand specs because I am not an expert as much. So if you'd like a direct answer to this question about your specific specs here, please reach out to our support team and ask this exact question. I will get back to you through that venue and see if I can get you a specific answer or make a remedy to whatever you are bringing up there. Appreciate it. Fernando, you asked, will Wingman work with different RFQ formats like email, text, Excel spreadsheet, and Word files? Right now, Wingman is interpreting email content found in email file formats forwarded in or uploaded. So the answer right now is temporarily no, but in the long term, absolutely, we're going to start to understand more from these broader contexts. I think the next level up you'll expect to see is starting to understand BOM spreadsheets included in RFQ content for assembly setup. And in the long term, we're thinking about other ways that RFQs come in and how we can interpret that information. Like I said in this presentation, this is just the beginning of what we're doing here. So we'll be excited to get to that at some point in the future. An attendee asked, will Wingman gets the time wrong when the quote is uploaded? Can this be fixed? Great call out. I'd love it if you want to reach out to our support team and tell us a little bit more about what you mean. I think we've heard about this once or twice, but it is really helpful if you can provide a specific example of what went wrong about it. One thing that Wingman does is it tries to consult all of the context of your email thread and consider the time with all of the factors in your thread. So there may be a reason that you're not quite seeing yet as to why it's done what it's done, and or a reason why you'd want it to work differently. Please let us know how you'd like it to work. Appreciate it. Fernando, you asked, will Wingman be available as API functionality? Another great question. At this time, the answer to that is no. Right now, we're reserving Wingman for intentional use within Paperless Parts features and experiences. But as Wingman becomes more reliable over time, we will strongly consider the right way to leverage this with API functionality. Of course, we want to make sure that if we're giving you information, that you have enough context, even in the API use, to understand how reliable that information is. So we have to think a little bit further about that before we deliver it to you. Patrick, you asked if you can read GD&T info, will you ever build out bubbling capabilities? Another fantastic question I will be excited to share with my team. This is something we are definitely thinking about. You know, there are a lot of reasons to bubble on your print. We understand one of them is going to be for QA reasons, right? I think right now we're considering that QA is a little farther downstream from the quoting process. But we also know that bubbling can be really useful as a process for diagnosing what's in your part so you can actually get your quote done, finding the critical requirements and calling them out, either for note-taking purposes or even to use for costing. It's that former use case that is very exciting to us. So I think while right now I can't promise you that capability, I can say that is another thing that is top of mind for us. Really appreciate you asking. Brian, you asked, can AI detect an XLSX file within an email and use it for the BOM, or does the quote info have to reside within the email body? Right now, email body, in the near future, or I'm not offering a time frame for that, we'll be looking to read from XLSX files and use that for BOM, either line item or more ideally in BOM building functionality for assemblies. Appreciate that question. Riki, you asked, Wingman scans and calls out materials and specs. Will there be any cross collaboration between approved spec vendors and post-process finishes to improve quote times? Love that question and ultimately quite broad. Right now, we are, I think I'm going to interpret that question in two ways. One, are we thinking about partnering with anybody as we interpret specs? I think the answer is softly yes, right? We'd like to make sure that our specs are coming from reliable sources, either empirical information we find online or from the source of truth themselves. So partnership is definitely something that we are thinking about if you want to send us ideas your way. And then improve quote times. I think there are many ways that I can interpret that particular part of the sentence. I think in terms of accelerating your quoting activity, my previous part of the answer stands. And in terms of any of the actual details of costing, that's probably too complicated of a question for me to answer right now. Appreciate the question though. Adolf, you asked from Mark Showalter, if we start the quote with a step file and then add a PDF as a supporting file, will Wingman read this from PDF even though it isn't the primary file? Fantastic question. Absolutely. Prints uploaded to Paperless Parts will be consumed by Wingman and scanned for that valuable information. So even if they're not the primary file, you'll hopefully still get the right inferences from them. Peter, you asked, will this presentation be available after today? I believe yes. Our policy for these power lunches is to upload them to the power lunch portion of our website. So yes, you should be able to access them there. Riki, adding to your question, will Paperless Parts provide you with approved vendors? That is a great question. That is not something that is in our current plans, but is something that is also top of mind for us in the long, long term. Understanding the intersection between the specs that you find and the vendors that means that you can work with is definitely something we're thinking about. Although executing on that can be quite complicated as we start to think about the web of connections and information that means and how much we can reliably make that decision for you versus having to have you supply us with a lot of information to make those choices. So great question. I love that you're thinking about that. If you have ideas about how we can do it, please reach out to our support team and let us know. I'd love to talk with you further about what you're thinking in that space. Thanks. Robert, can you take a look at the general chat? Yes, I will definitely get there. I just wanted to make sure I answered the open Q&A questions first, and then I'll move right to chat. And I'll get to Courtney's question in there too. Jim, you asked along the same line of ballooning for calculating FAI or PPAP requirements, a counter features and calls would be very helpful. Great to know. As you saw in my demo, there is currently a count of things that we've found, but they're not necessarily discriminating between specific types of callouts. Really great to know that you have a specific example of how that count or a subset of information in a count can be useful. I will take note of that for later discussion. Appreciate it. Heading over to the chat. Yeah, did not mean to ignore y'all. Appreciate your patience. Will this check against an existing tooling database? Right now, the answer to that question is no, Courtney. But if you are interested in that kind of thing, I'd love it if you reach out to our support team and let us know why you're asking that, what you're thinking about, what you want us to find from that kind of existing database, because that seems really intriguing as a potential use case. Jim, similar question. Is there a plan to allow this feature to reference an internal table of specs and materials? Right now, the answer to that question is no. But as this question is now coming up twice, that seems very intriguing for us to think about. So I will keep that top of mind and also reach out to us further if you have more thoughts about that. Mark, you asked, if we start the quote with a step file, this is the question I already answered. Yes, we will work with non-primary files as well. John, does it find an exotic material callout like invar 36? Great question. Right now, we are strongly identifying materials that are the most commonly used across the industry with that kind of guarantee of reliability. Top of mind for us going forward is recognizing more rare materials, understanding that that's where a lot of the risk can crop up. So I will not guarantee that we'll find that particular material yet because I don't know that off the top of my head, but you can trust that we're thinking about making sure we can help you answer that question that you're answering there. Is there an exotic material in my part or quote? Peter, I believe I answered your question as well. Rob, is it learning based on changes? Is Wingman learning based on changes? Great question. Right now, Wingman is not learning based on the decisions that you're making. Right now, we are focusing on making Wingman reliable by not biasing it positively or negatively from the activities that you do, right? Think about a case where one of your team members makes a different decision that you as an expert estimator might make about a particular part or quote. We wouldn't necessarily want to learn the incorrect lesson from what every single team member on your team is doing about a particular extraction. And also, we think we can deliver a strong amount of reliability by really just focusing on finding empirically true information and translating that for you. It's something we're thinking about. How can Wingman improve from your particular quotes instance? And I think other ways that we're entertaining that idea are around you telling us how to respond to the contents of extractions as a part of automation, as opposed to learning automatically from your activities. Um, Yes, Michael, to answer your question, as Robert also answered, previous training videos are available on the Power Lunch section of our website, where you can see all manner of previous presentations like this one about features. And if you have something that you are looking to understand that is not covered by those Power Lunches, just reach out to our support team. Going back to our Q&A, I think that we are all set there. Appreciate y'all sticking around this whole time and asking all these wonderful questions. It was so wonderful to present this to you today, and we are deeply excited for you to use Wingman and have it accelerate your quote setup and costing and triage experiences. If you have further thoughts, questions, comments, or feedback, please reach out to our support team and also consult any material that you're sent after this webinar is over, including a survey on how it went and any follow-up material that you can read. Again, have a great rest of your day and enjoy Wingman in Paperless Parts.